It's June 17th, 2002, and the WWE's biggest weekly show, Monday Night Raw, is in Oakland, California. And The Rock has come back to the WWE, the updated name of the WWF. The crowd can't believe he's actually here, but sure enough, The Rock bursts into the arena.
Oh my God! I don't believe it! It's the People's Champion! The Rock! The Rock has come home!
The Rock wasn't supposed to be here tonight. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has been on the road for 2 months promoting his first starring movie role in The Scorpion King. But he's here now, jumping around the ring as the crowd wildly embraces their returning hero.
And this is a moment.
Finally, The Rock has come back to Oakland!
The plan was for The Rock to be gone for another month, but last week, an exhausted and fed up Steve Austin stormed off and quit the company after a dispute with the man who runs it all, Vince McMahon. The two aren't seeing eye to eye on the creative direction for Steve's in-ring character, Stone Cold. Wrestling fans don't know what to make of the story. This is professional wrestling after all. This all could be part of a bit. But it's not. It's very real. Steve Austin is gone, and now there's a giant void at the top of the WWE. So Vince McMahon needs a top guy, and now, in his eyes, there's only one option: The Rock. So Vince has asked Dwayne to say some harsh words about Steve as The Rock.
Vince McMahon, what's wrong? You look a little surprised. Were you not expecting The Rock? Were you expecting Steve Austin? Did you think that Steve Austin was just going to walk down that ramp? Is that what you thought?
As a matter of fact,
It doesn't matter what you thought!
Dwayne respects Steve Austin. Hell, he understands having issues with the creative direction of a character. He's been through a few real-life frustrations with Vince McMahon himself. But Dwayne just can't let this slide. In Dwayne's mind, Steve Austin left everyone high and dry. The WWE, the wrestlers in the locker room, and the fans, which is what bugs Dwayne the most. The fans deserve better from Steve Austin, but he quit on them. Dwayne Johnson, seeing how much fans came around to him during his transformation, vows to never turn his back on them. And that is why he's back in the ring right now as The Rock, ready to electrify the crowd.
And we all know The Rock is supposed to be on SmackDown. We all know that The Rock wasn't supposed to return until next month. But considering what happened last week, The Rock will be damned if he didn't come here the very first opportunity he had and speak to each and every single one of you live.
Yeah, some of the words in the promo were written by Vince, but every word rings true for Dwayne. Just like every promo he's cut as The Rock before this, it's what he himself believes. So when he calls out Steve Austin, the new heat between them is real. His words aren't a character sticking to a script. This is one man calling out another for all to hear.
Austin can take his ball and go home. But as far as The Rock is concerned, as far as I'm concerned, this is home.
As he stares out at the crazed crowd, he knows he nailed it. He just can't help but wonder, will his words find their way back to Steve Austin? And will his only true rival ever do anything about it? From Wondery, I'm Dan Rubenstein, and this is Sports Wars. In episode 4, we retrace Stone Cold Steve Austin and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's rivalry as they set TV ratings and sales records for the WWE before peaking with WrestleMania 17's main event. And then, everything changed. The Rock star was rising in Hollywood. Bigger offers started to roll in on TV and in films, threatening to take him away from the multi-generational family business. Could The Rock really walk away from the ring and his rivalry with Stone Cold Steve Austin? As The Rock star burned bright, Steve was burning out. Mounting injuries, fast living, and marriage troubles sent Steve to a bad place. That, mixed with a real-life rift with Vince McMahon, threatened to keep Stone Cold out of the ring forever. Now it's 2002, and the new Hollywood star and a veteran wrestling megastar are both wondering if they can come together for one last match to answer the biggest question of all: who is the greatest wrestler in WWE history? This is episode 5, One More Round. It's June 2002, and Steve Austin is pissed. He's home in hot and humid San Antonio, stewing over his decision to walk out of the WWE as he watches Monday Night Raw from his couch. And right there on his TV screen is The Rock, flapping his gums about who else but Steve Austin.
Everyone on SmackDown, all those guys on SmackDown, they are there because they want to be there. They get in this ring, they bust their ass, you love them for that, and they do it because they love to do it. You gotta love it. So The Rock says this: if there is anybody in the back, I swear to God, I honestly mean this, if there's anybody in the back that does not want to be with this company, if there's anyone at SmackDown that does not want to be with this company, then just like the slogan says, you get the F out.
Steve leans forward on his couch, a scowl forming on his face. He mutters to himself, "I did get the hell out, genius." Steve knows the wrestling business. The show must go on. Steve thinks that after he bailed, Vince probably ran straight to The Rock to save the show. But Steve is also surprised that The Rock would do this to him, publicly. These words might have come from Vince, but Dwayne had to agree to say them. This especially gets under Steve's skin because he helped Dwayne every time the younger wrestler came to him with a question or problem. Every time he needed advice, Steve was there for him. Stone Cold was an undeniable influence on The Rock. Steve then slams a beer as he continues to simmer. He thinks, just like everyone else there, Dwayne's another sellout. Now Vince is sending him to bury me on air? The guy with one foot in Hollywood? Pathetic. Steve flings the empty beer can against the wall and changes the channel. He's had enough of The Rock and definitely enough of the WWE. It's August 2002, just a few weeks after walking away from the WWE, and now Steve Austin is walking himself into the San Antonio Police Department. He's turning himself in. He made the worst mistake of his life, his real life, not some character nonsense Vince McMahon cooked up. He did this, and he's ashamed. Just 5 days after leaving the WWE, he and his wife got into a fight. A domestic violence charge quickly followed. It was ugly. The press got word, and while Steve is cooperating with authorities, he doesn't want to talk to the press. He doesn't want to talk to any reporters. It just hurts too much to address what he's become so quickly. After being processed by the police for his arrest, Steve hands over a $5,000 check to the bail agent. Steve is in a mountain of trouble, but he knows it's nothing compared to what Deborah went through and is going through. She hasn't left him, at least not yet, and she's been telling him that she's desperate for him to get the help he clearly needs. More counseling and court-ordered anger management. It's clear that Steve has work to do on himself before he can get back in the ring with anyone else. It's August 25th, 2002 at Nassau Coliseum just outside New York City. It's WWE's SummerSlam, and The Rock is in the middle of the ring hearing something he hasn't heard in a long, long time.
The Rock is dead serious about this. One question. Do you really want to boo The Rock?
There's the answer.
It's the first time he's heard crowds like this since those dark days in '96 when the fans rejected everything about his in-ring character and showered him with vicious chants and boos. The memory of those nights rattle around in Dwayne's head as he stares out at the crowd once again. In their minds, he turned his back on wrestling for a full-time acting career. They feel like The Rock has genuinely betrayed them. It's jarring for Dwayne, but as The Rock, he can't appear fazed. Tonight, he's battling a 25-year-old future star, Brock Lesnar, in the main event. The event has been 15 minutes of hard-hitting action. Brock, like Dwayne, was a college football player. He loves to hit people, and it rarely looks fake.
What a hit! What a hit! Brock like a linebacker, almost taking the Rock out of his boots.
Brock is the bruising bad guy, a bully The Rock is supposed to put in his place. But listening to this crowd, Dwayne remembers the one thing wrestling fans will always turn on: insincerity. Tonight calls for The Rock to do what is right for the business and lose clean to the up-and-coming star. But Dwayne knows, as he hears the boos rain down, that longtime fans see through that kind of stuff. Well, thinks Dwayne, if they're gonna boo my character for bailing on him, I'll give them a real reason to boo. He then grabs the house mic and fires back at the jeering fans.
As of now, Sing Along with The Rock is over.
And with that, as the boos grow louder and louder, The Rock walks out of a WWE ring with only one box left unchecked: beating Steve Austin at Wrestlemania, and now he's not sure if he'll ever get his shot. It's the winter of 2002. Steve Austin is on his lonely, quiet property during a cold, gray day in San Antonio as he walks out to his mailbox to check the mail. It's a long walk. Steve's property is pretty big, and this simple act helps him to fill his otherwise empty days. Since Steve left the WWE back in June, Vince McMahon has tried to reach him to patch things up. 3 phone calls that Steve didn't want to answer. Steve isn't ready. He regrets a lot of his choices over the last few months, especially how his marriage ended, and he isn't sure what to do now. Even if he were ready to return, his body is screaming at him. He still needs a break from the beating. Even now, as he approaches his mailbox, he can feel the pain ringing in his neck and legs. Also, his reflexes haven't been good for a while now. It all raises the question, who is Steve Austin without wrestling? He's definitely not The Rock and doesn't want to be. He likes to act, he's gotten some parts, but it never feels like it's his thing. He knows it. He's meant to wrestle, to tell his story in the ring. He looks down at the stack of mail he just pulled out of his mailbox. Among the bills and junk mail is a handwritten card from good old JR at the WWE. Steve stares at the note. Since leaving the company, Steve has thought of Jim Ross, the announcer and one-time talent executive, as the guy who betrayed him when he needed an ally on the inside. So, hell no, he's not reading his card. Steve then flips through some fan mail, tosses aside some bills, and then goes back to the note from JR. Ross was the friend who helped him to develop the Stone Cold character. He's the voice of the WWE that built Stone Cold into a star, the guy who could give him his last shot. He turns the card over and reads the words, "If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Steve takes a second to think. then stomps back to his house to pick up the phone and make a call. A few weeks later, Steve Austin is alone in a suite on the 30th floor of the Westin Hotel in Houston, Texas. Steve is here to meet with Vince McMahon after talking for hours with Jim Ross about a plan to patch things up. But now, Vince is making Steve wait. Steve isn't surprised by the power play. That's the old man for you. As Steve paces in the room alone, he hears the door bust open without a knock. It's Vince. He has a serious look on his face, but he extends a strong hand to Steve as they settle into seats to talk things through. Steve has a lot on his mind. He was angry when he walked out. It felt like he wasn't truly being valued as the top guy in the business. He was pissed at the segments and shows Vince put on air, like the one with The Rock that was designed to tear him down. Yeah, Steve has a lot on his mind, but above all that, the most important thing he wants to do is apologize. Steve leans forward and clears his throat. This is hard for the proud, stubborn loner. He says, "I'm sorry, Vince, but I did what I did." Vince takes a long pause. Steve wonders if Vince is even going to accept his apology. Vince then leans forward. He says, "Steve, I accept your apology. Would you consider coming back?" Before he answers, Steve hesitates. He's not exactly happy with himself for the way he left, but he still stands by leaving. He still doesn't like how he was treated. Does he even want to come back? Steve thinks it over, but he knows the answer. Wrestling is his entire life. He tells Vince, "Hell yeah. Let's do business again." And with that, it's time for Stone Cold Steve Austin to get back to work. It's February 23rd, 2003 in Montreal, and Stone Cold Steve Austin just got back in the ring in the second-to-last match of the night, and he's feeling really good about it. He's catching his breath backstage when he looks up at a monitor to see the man at the center of the night's main event, The Rock. The Rock is still a huge WWE draw, even as the fans chant "sell out" at him because they know Dwayne Johnson is leaving the ring again for another Hollywood movie. Steve chuckles to himself as he hears the chants, but he doesn't think Dwayne deserves it. The Rock stepped into Stone Cold's spot and carried the load for the WWE while he was gone. So he talks some trash. I'm over it, thinks Steve. He's got bigger things on his mind than grudges. He wants his spot back at the top of wrestling, and the best way for Stone Cold to get that back is by getting in the ring to do business with The Rock. And would you look at that, Wrestlemania 19 is just around the corner. Steve wants to give the fans the match they deserve. He bets Dwayne does too. So now it's time to make up with The Rock and face him one last time. It's March 29th, 2003, the night before WrestleMania 19, and Steve Austin is being rushed to a Seattle area hospital in the back of an ambulance. EMTs and WWE doctors are hovering over him, taking vitals and scribbling notes. They're calm, but Steve's definitely not. He screams, "I'm fixing to die right here." Everyone in the ambulance assures Steve he's not gonna die. But to him, it sure damn feels like it. Just minutes earlier, he finished his second workout of the day. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness hit him, and his heart started to pound like it was trying to escape his chest. He nearly collapsed at his hotel. He's been pushing way too hard. Tomorrow is supposed to be the last match in his wrestling career, and the hype for the match has been hot right from the start. On a recent episode of Monday Night Raw, of course, it was The Rock who challenged Stone Cold to one more match.
The Rock's coming out here to talk to you. Stone Cold, what you don't understand is this. The Rock in this business. The Rock has done it all. He's done it all. The one thing that The Rock has not done one thing is whoop that bald candy ass at WrestleMania. So what do you say, Stone Cold? What do you say?
It was The Rock up there speaking in the third person, but Steve knew it was Dwayne Johnson pouring himself into the moment. The Rock had done it all, but when he set out to get to the top of the wrestling business, he was chasing Steve Austin. Now, years later, Dwayne wanted nothing more than to get in the ring with Steve and tear down the house one more time. A final chapter in their battle over the title of Best of All Time. But now, Steve's strapped to a gurney and not sure if this match will happen at all. Steve can hear the medical professionals tossing out theories about what's wrong. One of them suggests he might have a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot in his lungs. Oh man, Steve thinks to himself. Is this how the career of the toughest SOB around, Stone Cold Steve Austin, is really going to end? Sports Wars is supported by Simply Safe, the folks who help me sleep better at night. Yeah, it's true. They do help. With home security, there are two ways you can go about protecting your home. There's the traditional way, where you wait weeks for a technician to do a messy installation that costs like the GDP of a small country. That's accurate. I did the math. Or there's the other way. Simply Safe. Simply Safe is everything you need in a home security system. This is a comprehensive protection for your entire home. Your whole home is essentially blanketed in safety. You know the movie Entrapment? I don't know if it's like that, but that's what I'm imagining. Just everything is taken care of. There's outdoor cameras and doorbells that alert you to anyone approaching your home. Entry, motion, and glass break sensors guard the inside of your home, which, to me, that's a pretty important part of your home. What I love is that you can set up the system all by yourself. And yeah, I can speak to that. I did it. It takes about a half hour to an hour tops. And just like that, you'll have an army of highly trained security experts ready to dispatch local police to your home at a moment's notice 24/7. Go to simplysafe.com/sportswars today and you'll get free shipping and a 60-day risk-free trial. Go now and be sure you go to simplysafe.com/sportswars. That's simplysafe.com/sportswars. It's March 30th, 2003. Steve Austin walks out onto the set of WrestleMania 19 in the center of Safeco Field in Seattle. The northwest sun is shining down on the open-air baseball stadium. The show is still hours away, but Steve chokes back tears as he stands at the top of the entrance ramp and looks out at the setup for what's probably his last wrestling match ever. A match he now knows will actually happen. Steve just spent the night in the hospital. After a battery of tests, and for Steve's taste, too much medical prodding and poking, doctors assured Steve he didn't suffer a heart attack. And no blood clot in his lung either. No, Steve Austin just needed water. Nervous and fighting exhaustion in the build-up to the match, Steve inhaled an obscene amount of energy drinks, coffee, and ephedra into his system. He was dangerously dehydrated. Steve needed 4 liters of fluid added to his body to feel normal once again. By 10 a.m., he checked himself out of the hospital and was ready for action. All without fans having even the tiniest clue about his hospital stay. Steve then slowly walks down the ramp, taking in every sight and sound of the bustling production crew readying the mostly empty stadium. As he reaches the end of the ramp, he finds a person sitting in the ring. The person the fans want to see him wrestle most, Dwayne Johnson. Dwayne is there waiting to talk out the night's match with Steve. They need to create a roadmap for what they'll be doing, but more importantly, this is a chance for these two rivals to figure out the final steps for their long shared journey. As Steve slowly approaches, unsure of what Dwayne's reaction will be, he can't help but think back to all the times he and Rock have battled in the ring as they jockeyed for a better position in the company and pushed each other to constantly one-up one another. That nervous kid with the silly hair Steve first met in '96 turned out to be the one guy with whom he had a special chemistry in the ring. The one guy who drove him to reach his ceiling as a performer. It hasn't always been smooth, especially recently, but Steve wouldn't want to be here with anyone else and hopes Dwayne feels the same way as Steve climbs into the ring and stands before him. Dwayne immediately tells him, "All right, let's figure out this last chapter of The Rock and Stone Cold." Steve tells him that the only thing he wants is for Rock to take a long moment right before he goes for the last move. Steve knows that it'll be a way to let people know that this is it. Dwayne tells him, "You got it." Steve then gets sentimental for a moment and tells The Rock that he's glad that he's the one to send him home. Steve extends his hand. Dwayne smiles, raises that Rock eyebrow, and firmly shakes Steve's hand. A few hours later, WrestleMania 19 is underway, but the big match is still a few segments away. The Rock is being interviewed outside his locker room. And right now, Dwayne has a lot of things on his mind going into this historic match. He's not done wrestling, at least not yet, but he knows that his days as a full-time wrestling star are over. It's not just the allure of movie stardom pulling him away from the ring, it's that he wants to earn success in business on his own. He doesn't want to leverage the WWE or even his fans to earn success. Really, it's no different than when he left football to enter the family business, when he fought against using the legacy to move himself up. He didn't find true success until he became his own man. But as the match looms, Dwayne is very serious about what this match means to the legacy he built himself. He's somehow accomplished everything in his wrestling career that he set out to do, except beat Steve Austin at WrestleMania. So, Dwayne Johnson gets into character as The Rock and tells fans exactly how he feels.
Gonna beat that bald-headed bastard, guaranteed! And then, Coach, The Rock would have done it all. Finally!
As he walks off, the crowd, filled with those fans who've been booing him these last few months out of a real place of disappointment, cheer wildly out of respect. It's time to bring this journey to a close. A few minutes later, Steve Austin is waiting for The Rock to grab him again. He's waiting for the last move of the match. It's been a brutal, back-and-forth 18-minute match, a real slobber knocker, as Jim Ross likes to say. But now, The Rock is going for a third rock-bottom slam to push Stone Cold to the brink of defeat. Before he does, though, The Rock, really more so Dwayne, does what Steve asked of him when they met earlier in the day to plan things out. Take an extra long moment before that final move. It's a chance for the fans to pick up on the moment's significance, but it's also very much a moment for Steve to take in the final seconds of his storied career, to think back to those shabby rings in which he trained, the long drives to matches that paid him nothing, and for the giant leaps towards stardom he always knew he'd take. This is the last round for Steve Austin, and it's rightfully coming at the hands of The Rock. As he stares up into the crisp Seattle night, Steve's happy he's going out like a wrestler should, on his back, being pinned. That's what tradition dictates. The retiring veteran should pass on the win to their opponent as a springboard of sorts, a victory to build on. That's what respect for the business demands. Wrestling isn't about the wins and losses. It's about the stories you tell. And now, tonight, he's told one final story with The Rock. After the referee counts to 3, Dwayne leans his head down close to his longtime rival. He tells him, "Thank you. I love you, brother. I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for me." Steve Austin fought long and hard to prove he's the top guy in the business. The Rock has always been right there with him, and Steve is glad he's with him now. He tells him, "I love you too, man." It's officially the end of an era, but you haven't been paying attention if you think it's the last time this rivalry will ever heat up in a wrestling ring. It's April 6th, 2014, and WrestleMania 30 is in New Orleans, Louisiana, 11 years after the last chapter in the greatest rivalry in pro wrestling history. Earlier, Hulk Hogan welcomed fans to the WWE's annual Spotlight show as the event's host, a testament to his place as the first modern top guy in Vince McMahon's WWE. He's the top guy pioneer. Suddenly, though, there's a surprise.
There are definitely going to be more special WrestleMania moments. And you never know when one of those special moments... Oh my God!
Are you kidding me? Is he really here?
Stone Cold Steve Austin is stomping to the ring like it's 1998 again, taking the stage from the Hulkster and grabbing control of the audience like he did so many times before with nothing more than a mean mug. Stone Cold soaks in the crowd's cheers before going face to face with Hulk. Both men stare each other down, partially for show, partially each standing for their place in history. Stone Cold then drops all of his best catchphrases to the absolute joy of the crowd. Then Steve loses some of the act and gets serious.
Hulk Hogan kicked a lot of ass. For a long time, we've been very protective of our legacies. Sitting next to you, watching all the dues you paid, what you did for the business. I got nothing but respect for you. I'm here to say I appreciate the living hell out of what you've done for this business.
Look at that.
Can somebody give Stone Cold Steve Austin a hell yeah?
Steve shakes Hulk's hand, killing those old feelings of animosity in the mid-90s when Hogan pushed Steve Austin out of World Championship Wrestling. Things worked out fine for both of them, so there's no bad blood here today. Life has been good for Steve since he left the ring, but he still feels most at home in front of this sold-out crowd. Austin gives one final Austin 316 catchphrase to close out the segment, and then...
If you smile,
What? Oh my God! No, you're kidding me. This cannot be. Oh, he's here! The Brahma Bull is here! The People's Champion! I smell it! Yes, I smell it!
The Great One emerges. The People's Champ is here. The Rock is in the building. Time to answer the eternal question. Who is truly the greatest WWE top guy of all time? With a smile and biceps bulging bigger than ever, The Rock heads to the ring.
This is WrestleMania. It's an honor for me to be in the ring in front of you two. It is an honor for me to be in the ring in front of you, the WWE Universe, the world is looking. It's boots to asses time. If you smell what The Rock is cooking.
The Rock finally left the WWE in 2004 after WrestleMania 20, but he never forgets his roots and what drove him to the mountaintop of sports entertainment. As the segment wraps up, the question floats across the minds of everyone watching. Who's the greatest of all time? Hulk Hogan was the greatest at one point, but he was passed by the other two guys with whom he's sharing the ring. The question now of who's the greatest of all time clearly comes down to Stone Cold or The Rock. Now, as the sold-out crowd in the Superdome continues to lose their minds, it's clear who the top guy is. It's the two of them. There is no Rock without Stone Cold. There is no Texas Rattlesnake without the Brahma Bull. Most sports rivalries have scoreboards or quantifiable stats or championships or awards. Not this one. The core of the competition between Steve Austin and The Rock has always been about earning the respect and attention of the fans. They each had stretches as the top guy, but couldn't earn that status without the other. So now they share that title. It's February 10th, 2020. Just weeks after burying his father, wrestling legend Rocky Johnson, Dwayne Johnson is walking into the WWE Performance Center in Orlando, Florida. He's been on the road, working hard as usual, promoting his latest business venture, show, or movie. But Dwayne Johnson needed to take this moment here today. He's here to spend a few hours with a new batch of WWE recruits. Their journey is just beginning, and Dwayne wants to pay back the business that made him a star. It's always important for The Rock to come home. He knows his words resonate. The new recruits listen closely. It means a lot to Dwayne whenever he has the chance to share his insight and experience on wrestling, business, and life. But today, in a room full of fresh faces mesmerized by his presence, he's only speaking to one recruit. She's the newest and youngest recruit of them all. His 18-year-old daughter, Simone Johnson, is now the first ever fourth-generation WWE wrestler. She's been training hard, learning the craft of wrestling, and as Dwayne looks across the sea of fresh faces, he can't help but wonder if any of them will become a rival for his daughter like Steve Austin was for him. Someone who will bring out the best in her, drive her to the top of the sport. We'll certainly find out, Dwayne thinks. But right now, he's here to watch his daughter begin her journey. A journey that will be uniquely her own. Good luck out there, jabronis. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Sports Wars. If you did, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Wondery.com, or wherever you're listening to this right now. If you're listening on a smartphone, tap or swipe over the cover art of this podcast. You'll find the episode notes and some offers from our sponsors. By supporting our sponsors, you help us offer you the show for free. If you like what you've heard, we'd love for you to give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe. Another way to support us is to answer a short survey at Wondery.com/survey and tell us which Sports Wars stories you'd like to hear. And a quick note about the conversations you've been hearing. We can't know exactly what was said, but this dialogue is based on our best research. I'm your host, Dan Rubenstein. I also co-host the Solid Verbal College Football Podcast with new episodes dropping each week all year long. Ken Napsik wrote this story with Nick Mundy. Produced by Yaron Descalo, Gabe Goodwin, and Gabe Riven. Sound design by Steve Porter. Our executive producers are Jenny Lauer-Beckman, Marshall Louis, and Hernan Lopez for Wondery.